Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Just to begin, we'll start with some practice. Simply bring awareness to your breathing at the abdomen. Feel your breathing and become aware of what it's like to breathe right now. Is your breathing fast or slow? Is your mind tending towards concentration or towards distraction as you focus on the breathing? What does the act of paying attention to your breathing show you about your awareness right now? Simply follow your breath and use that exercise as a tool to notice the quality of your mind. So you follow the breath. See if you can use that technique to become curious about the state of your mind. Very good. It's nice to see you all. A number of people joining us online and quite a few people here at Oak in Berkeley. As usual, we'll begin by introducing ourselves and also saying a little bit about ourselves. So you can say your name and also use one word to describe what you noticed about your mind as you did that exercise just now. So I'll begin and then we'll move to all of the people that are physically here in the space with us. There are some people that are outside and back, and we'll try to get answers from them, although it might be, we're not sure if it's audible or not, but we'll try. And then we'll move to all of you, our friends joining us online from different locations. So my name is Tasshin, and noticed calm.
My name is Kyle, and I noticed sluggish.
My name is Diana, and I noticed my breath being unstable and my mind being jumpy.
Hi, I'm Alice, and I noticed busy.
I'm Zev. I noticed kind of frenetic, but then starting to slow down.
Hello, I'm Pam. My mind was roaring.
Hi, I'm Tasshin. I noticed I was a little sleepy.
Hi, I'm Bobby, and I noticed grasping.
Hi, I'm Tasshin, and I notice sometimes calm and sometimes distracted.
Hi, I'm David. I noticed restlessness.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I noticed ruminating.
Let's go to Ralph. We can't hear you. Can other people hear you?
He's still muted.
Ralph, you're still muted.
Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Ralph. Little racy today.
Let's go to Tasshin.
Willow.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Tasshin, and I noticed calm excitement.
Can you come a little closer to your mic, friends?
Okay. Should I repeat myself?
That would be helpful.
I'm Tasshin, and I noticed calm excitement. Is that better? Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Amit, and I noticed a need to impress.
I'm Yuli, and I noticed that my mind was grasping.
Let's go to Renee.
Renee?
I'm Renee, and my mind was settling.
Let's go to Amy.
Amy Raby here. A few things, but mostly okayness.
Lynn and Bob.
Hi, my name is Lynn, and my mind felt comfortable.
I am Bob, and my mind felt peaceful.
So is there no way to turn it up, friend? Can we stop using that speaker?
The speaker's not.
Hmm.
We're not going to use the speaker.
Hmm.
Let's go to Kate. You're still muted, Kate.
Kate, you're still muted.
You're still muted.
You have to change something on your computer.
Let's go to Rich for a moment and see if, Kate, you can find the unmute button in the meantime, and we'll try to come back to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rich. I noticed stationary mind.
Okay, you could also, if you can find the chat, you could also type in how you're doing. Okay.
Let's go to Amin.
I'm Amin, and I noticed distraction.
Let's go to Christine. Christine, you're still muted.
It's in a different place. Hi, my name is Christine, and my mind felt like an airplane landing safely, and it felt really good to land and be safe.
Let's go to Pam.
Hello, I'm Pam. I couldn't hear you for most of it, so my mind reacted by being frantic and upset over a meditation.
Let's go to Hannah. Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I just kind of popped in and noticed we're all kind of learning to navigate the tech space.
So I apologize, we couldn't necessarily hear all of you, but it's good to be with you. Can you hear me right now? Okay, great. Good. Well, some of you have been in the last few talks, and some of you are new friends for me, at least. It's nice to see all of you. Just to catch you up, we're exploring Buddhism in these series of talks by way of looking at the many numbered lists that are present in Buddhism. So the Buddha and other Buddhist teachers use this pedagogical device of connecting various concepts by way of numbered lists. And so today we're discussing the Four Noble Truths. Previously, we discussed the Three Jewels, the Four Great Vows, and what did we discuss last week? Oh, the Three Pure Precepts, yes. So today we're discussing the Four Noble Truths, and the basic reason for doing this is that this is a way to explore from a very broad angle what Buddhism is all about, looking through these different numbered lists, and the opportunity is available to you to memorize these lists as we review them. It can be useful to commit these various lists to memory, and in that way explore Buddhism from different angles. So as I said, today we're discussing the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha lived about 2,500 years ago in India. And he said that he taught two things. He said he taught suffering and the end of suffering. This word suffering translates the word dukkha. There are other translations of this word, but it's most commonly translated in English into the word suffering. And of course, when the Buddha said that he taught suffering, he didn't mean that he taught that we should suffer or that we should practice suffering. Instead, he taught that there is suffering. There is suffering and there is an end to suffering. These two teachings of the Buddha can be broken down further into what we call the Four Noble Truths. And that's what we're discussing today. Those of you that have ever learned a foreign language or done some kind of translation know that translation is difficult. Languages don't map onto each other very evenly. Of course, we can translate things from one language to another, but often things are lost. It's easy to lose various connotations. It's easy to lose the sense of beauty that's present in one language as we translate it to another. There's, very broadly speaking, two different ways to translate. You can translate literally, where you try your best to convey the full meaning as you understand it in the original language in a new language. And you can also translate liberally, where you take various liberties with how you translate in an attempt to convey different meanings that are present in the original language, but you're not going for accuracy. So you might say something like accuracy versus completeness. So it's never quite possible to fully translate from one language to another, but there's different schools of thought on this. The literal school of translation often ends up with being quite awkward. If you try to literally translate word for word, phrase for phrase, it can become very awkward. You can say things that don't sound quite right in the new language in an attempt to be accurate with respect to what's being conveyed in the original language. A liberal translation can be more beautiful and more fluid, more natural to the language that's being translated into, but it can often risk being inaccurate. Taking these liberties has risks as well. So when you translate something, you have to decide how you want to interpret what's being said for your reader. And you just know you're going to lose something in translation. So suffering is a decent translation of this word dukkha. That's attempting, I would say, to be more of a literal translation, but it's not perfect. There are some connotations that are implied that may not have been meant in the original Pali, or the Buddha probably spoke in a language called Magadhan, which is related to Pali, but not quite the same. A more liberal translation that I've heard is bummer. So how Lee Brasington translates it, that things are a bummer. And you can see this is a liberal translation. Bummer is a colloquial, playful word in our language. That has connotations that probably weren't present in Pali or Magadhan. But, several of us are laughing a little bit. It conveys something that the word suffering doesn't, that can be useful. It can also be distracting. I like the translation dissatisfactoriness, which I think avoids some of the unfortunate connotations of the word suffering. It's not as fun as the word bummer, but it is a bit more useful, I would say. Of course, it's a little technical, a little dry. Dissatisfactoriness, what exactly does that mean? but I'd say it's a little bit more useful than suffering. One of the common misinterpretations of Buddhism that happens, especially I would say when we translate this word dukkha as suffering, is that people interpret Buddhism as being pessimistic, as being overly negative. People will often misrepresent Buddhism as saying all of life is suffering, for example. Well, that, to my understanding, is not what the Buddha meant by this word dukkha. It's easily disprovable. We can easily disprove that all of life is suffering. There are pleasant and joyful and happy moments in life, aspects of life. We can have fun, for example. We can laugh, as we just demonstrated. That's not suffering. It's fun. It's light. It's playful. There's joy. This is all possible in life, and to claim that all of life is suffering in the way that people often do is apparently false. We can disprove it easily when we smile or look at a beautiful sunset or spend time connecting to someone. Those things aren't suffering in the way that is meant in this sort of mistranslation. Of course, people don't willfully or intentionally misinterpret Buddhism, but this does often happen. You'll see people understanding Buddhism to mean this. And I think that that's a byproduct of what we might say is mistranslation, or the risks associated with translating the word dukkha as suffering. It's a good translation, but one of the risks there is that people will misinterpret the claim as saying everything is suffering, when this is, as I say, easily disprovable. I think dissatisfactoriness gets at a little bit more accurately. It's a little clunkier to speak of dissatisfactoriness than suffering, but I think it's a little bit more accurate and avoids that particular problem. For example, even a sunset, a beautiful sunset, most of us have experienced in our lives, it ends. It becomes night. That changes. No matter how much we enjoy the sunset, we can't hold on to it. And all of these pleasant, joyful experiences that we have in our life are like that. They come and they go. No matter how much joy they bring us, no matter how much pleasure we get out of them, they arise and they pass away. This is what's meant by saying that there is dissatisfactoriness. Even satisfying experiences end, for example. It's not that we don't have satisfying experiences. It's not that there isn't pleasure or joy or happiness in the ways that we typically understand life to be. Those things do happen. The Buddha is not claiming otherwise, but he's saying there is dissatisfactoriness. Even satisfying things cannot fully satisfy us. They can't last forever, for example. And this is the first noble truth, that there is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfactoriness, that things are a bummer, as Lee would say. There's another numbered list, the 3 characteristics, which we may or may not talk about later, but it claims that all sense phenomena have 3 characteristics. One of them is this quality of dukkha, of dissatisfactoriness, that any sense phenomena whatsoever that we have has dukkha, is dissatisfactory, cannot fully satisfy us. Again, that's not to say it's not pleasant or joyful. There are certainly pleasant and joyful experiences, but they are dissatisfactory. All sense phenomena are dissatisfactory, according to the Buddha. And part of that is because of the second of these 3 characteristics, that all sense phenomena are also impermanent. All sense phenomena arise and pass away, which means that they cannot permanently satisfy us. Even if they do satisfy us, they will cease to satisfy us. The Buddha said that there were 3 forms of suffering, 3 forms of dukkha. One is this form of suffering that people most commonly understand him to mean. This sort of gross suffering, you might say, big suffering, obvious suffering. Things like pain, for example, or aging and death, which caused the Buddha to go in search in his life. He realized that there was aging and death, and that horrified him. He decided to go in search of a way out of aging and death. We realize that we age and die, and that can horrify us. We realize that the people we love age and die, and that can horrify us. All of these are what you might call gross or obvious or large suffering. And that is indeed what's meant by dukkha, but there are other forms of dukkha, other forms of this dissatisfactoriness. There's also the dissatisfactoriness that's due to change that we were just talking about. Things change. That is itself dissatisfying, itself unsatisfactory, itself a cause of suffering. And then there's a third form of suffering, which is the suffering that's due to formations or conditions. And I would say, I don't fully understand what the Buddha meant by this, but my guess is it's something along the lines of what we were talking about earlier, that all sense phenomena have this characteristic of being dissatisfactory. Even beyond the fact that they're impermanent, they are themselves dissatisfactory. This isn't something that's easy to notice. It's difficult to notice, but when we meditate, we can become aware of this. And this is something we'll have a chance to do later. So there are three kinds of suffering. One is this gross or obvious suffering. One is suffering due to change, and one is what we might call intrinsic suffering, or suffering that's due to conditions or phenomena. This is the first noble truth, simply that there is suffering, simply that there is dissatisfactoriness. This can be itself a bummer for us. It can horrify us, can cause us to be desperate, but there's good news. The good news is that this suffering has a cause. This is the second noble truth. There is suffering, but there's a cause of that suffering. And that itself means, this is the third noble truth, that there's an end to suffering. If something has a cause, we can remove that cause and the effect will no longer happen. Buddhism is largely predicated on a refined understanding of causality, that things are caused, that there are conditions, that there are effects, that there are consequences. And things that have causes have effects, and those effects are cause. So if suffering is an effect and we remove its cause, there will not be suffering. This is the claim that's made, that there is suffering, yes, but it has a cause, and we can remove that cause. And if we do so, that effect, suffering, will no longer be present. This is a highly dry and technical way to describe awakening or enlightenment. That it's possible to end our suffering. This is what cessation, nibbana, awakening, is said to be, the end of suffering, that is possible. If the Buddha merely proclaimed that there was suffering, that life is dissatisfactory, there would be reason to think that Buddhism was a pessimistic worldview. If it was just noticing that there is dissatisfactoriness without a solution, that would be a bummer. I've seen people who argued that various philosophies in the West are this, just noticing that there is suffering, and they describe that differently, but they may not have a solution to it. And that's a very difficult place to be fully looking this fact of dissatisfactoriness in the eye without a way out, without even knowing that there could be a way out. That can cause a deep despair. And indeed, until we find for ourselves this way out, until we ourselves awaken, we are sort of in the shoes of such people. This is the experience that we have. We can notice when we practice, for example, that there is dissatisfactoriness, that there is suffering. And until we ourselves confirm that there is an end to that suffering, we don't know for sure that there is an end to suffering. We can have faith in the Buddhist teaching, in various teachers that we come into contact with, that there is such an end to suffering, but we don't know for sure with certainty until we find that for ourselves. And this is the position that we put ourselves in when we practice spirituality. And this brings us to the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth says that there is suffering, we experience suffering, and there's an end to suffering, the third noble truth, but there's a way from suffering to the end of suffering. In other words, that there's a path. We are here and we can go there. We are suffering and we can come to the end of suffering. There's a motion between these two states of affairs. And that path is the Noble Eightfold Path. It's nested within this list of 4. We may or may not look at that numbered list as well, but just for a sneak preview, it's right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi or concentration. So the 4 noble truths are that there is suffering, that suffering has a cause, which means that there's an end to suffering, and that there's a path from suffering to the end of suffering. I would say that our spiritual progress on this path is dependent on how closely we look at this word, dukkha, dissatisfactoriness, suffering, a bummer, if you will. If we look that squarely in the eye, we become willing to find the end of suffering. When we notice clearly, yes, there is indeed suffering, we naturally want to find its end. Many of us probably have had this experience. We have some kind of suffering in our life, and we see clearly this is not acceptable. I want to end this. I want to find a solution. I want to find a way out. It can be many things for us, different things for different people. You know, it can be a death in the family. It can be an injury. It can be noticing that we're aging. It can be noticing that we can't always be with those that we love. It can be some kind of pain. It can just be meditating, just simply meditating. We can notice this quality of dissatisfactoriness. For me, one of my very early experiences of dissatisfactoriness was in my youth. I often had headaches, very, very bad headaches. They would come seemingly out of nowhere and basically incapacitate me. I would have to go to bed for 8-12 hours, and then when I woke up, I would feel better. But that was really the only way I knew how to get out of these headaches. And they were terrible. I couldn't do anything. It was hard to, if I was at some kind of school activity, for example, it would be hard to participate because my headaches would be so bad. And I went to various doctors and they tried to examine me to see if there was something wrong with me. See, perhaps did I have some imbalance in my diet or some kind of physiological condition that was causing such bad headaches at that age. I never got really a clear diagnosis, but looking back on it, I suspect there might have been a very simple answer. I think I might have been dehydrated. Could have just been that simple, that I was often dehydrated and needed to drink more water. I really would love to go back in time and just drink more water on those occasions, because it may have solved it. When I get a headache now, I drink water and it seems to help. It's very simple. And this is, I think, a very good example of what is being taught here with these 4 noble truths. When I had a headache, I would do anything to get out of these headaches. They were just so bad. And of course, I would go to sleep, but I remember I had sort of a game with my mother where I would cope with how bad the headaches were by coming up with very elaborate complaints about how bad they were. I would make these very elaborate metaphors for what it was like to have a headache at that time. You know, it was as if there was a brick in front of my head and someone was like banging a brick into my forehead. And somehow just complaining about it in that way made it slightly better, very slightly better. Not really that much better, but somewhat better. Yeah, but suffering, it was suffering. I would have these headaches and I would do anything to get out of them. And at the same time, there was probably a root cause. Maybe it was that I was dehydrated, maybe it wasn't, but there was some kind of root cause that would cause me to frequently have headaches. And if I had found that root cause, I could address it at the root. Let's say it was that I was dehydrated. If I had simply drank water, then I would no longer have a headache. And so it's really like that for us as we walk this path. We notice in various ways that we're suffering, perhaps in a gross way that we're, for example, someone we love dies or something like that, that there is suffering, and we want to end it. We realize, I'll do anything to end this suffering. And fortunately, we can see that the suffering has a cause, that if we look closely at what's happening, there is a cause to the suffering. And if we remove that cause, then we can end it. The Buddha described the cause in various ways, but one way of describing it is craving. That we crave things, and if we stop craving things at this deep perceptual level, then that itself is the end of suffering. That itself is awakening. So perhaps the spiritual path is like my headaches as a kid. We notice this is bad. It's really bad. I will do anything to stop suffering. And then we find that there's a way out. We can drink water and not have a headache. In meditation practice, we can notice clearly there is suffering. There's suffering in my mind and there's suffering in others' minds. It's not acceptable wherever I find it, and I will do anything to end it. And then gradually we come to look at what the nature of this suffering is, and we find ways to end it for ourselves. And thankfully, the path to this end of suffering is very simple. It's very simple in that we don't have to purchase or acquire something. We don't have to get something. Instead, we let go of things. We drop things. So we have this craving and we let go of it. It's not that we buy a certain book or have a certain experience or do something specific. Instead, we notice that we are doing something, such as this word craving, and we see that that causes suffering and we let go of it. We drop it. It's a relief when we notice this because it means we don't have to become a different person. We don't have to get a specific experience. We don't have to buy something. We don't have to gain some skill that we don't already have. Instead, we just have to stop doing something that we're already doing. So as I say, this noticing of suffering is different for each of us. It's worth looking at that closely, looking at how we ourselves in our own lives notice that there is indeed suffering. dissatisfactoriness. And we can use that as motivation for coming to the end of that suffering. So we'll have a chance to do that today in the meditation. First, we'll establish a happy and concentrated state of mind using loving kindness. And then we'll use that happiness, that concentration, to look closely at this dissatisfactoriness in our own experience. We'll use the concentration as a kind of investigative tool for looking at whether in our own experience there is suffering. So we'll meditate for the next 40 minutes or so. Feel free at any time to use the restroom or get some water or something like that. But we'll be here meditating together for the next 40 minutes. Begin by straightening up, becoming upright in your spine. And settling in, noticing any muscular tension and relaxing. Position your body so that it's both upright and relaxed. With this upright, relaxed body, begin to say the phrase, "I love you," to yourself. Direct love and compassion towards yourself by saying the phrase, "I love you," in your mind. Be sure that you can hear the phrase clearly in your mind, so that every few seconds you're saying the phrase, "I love you," towards yourself. If you'd like, you're welcome to use a different phrase or even many different phrases. In any case, use mental talk to direct love, and friendliness, and compassion towards yourself. As you do this, bring forth an image of yourself being happy. See yourself being happy in your mind, using mental image to see yourself being happy, feeling loved. And at the same time, using mental talk to direct love and goodwill towards yourself. As you use mental image and talk to direct love towards yourself, you may find that this causes a reaction in your body. Perhaps a smile or a warm feeling in your heart. Maybe even a difficult or negative emotion. If there's a positive emotion that arises, enjoy that. Savor it and even spread it. If a negative emotion arises, allow that. Noticing it and caring for yourself, even as that difficult experience arises. And if no bodily reaction happens, if you have no emotional reaction, that's okay. Just continue to direct mental image and talk in a loving way towards yourself. We're using mental image and mental talk to generate a sense of love and care for ourselves. If you'd like, feel free to stay with that, caring for yourself in that way. Or you can direct this love and care towards others, using the same motion to send love and compassion to others. You can pick someone in your mind and use a phrase such as "I love you" to wish them well. You can visualize them being happy in your mind and use these to generate feelings of goodwill and love for others. It's fine to stay with just one person, such as yourself. And it's fine to move through many people. You decide how you wish to give rise to love and compassion at this time. It might be easier for you to give rise to love with mental talk. It might be easier for you to do that with images. Perhaps it's even possible to directly give rise to love in the body. In any case, do what works for you. Experiment and notice what happens. What's most important in this technique is giving rise to positive feelings in the body. It's not always easy to do that. But if we're able to do so, bring forth love and care in the body, savoring that joy and happiness that comes from that emotion. For the next few minutes, see how much love and care and happiness you can bring forth in your experience. Using mental image and mental talk as a way to generate these feelings. Very good. Now, using this happiness, this love, and any concentration that may have arisen, turn your attention to the following question. Is there dissatisfactoriness in my experience? Is there suffering in my experience? Is there dukkha in my experience? ask this question and look closely. The Buddha claimed that all sense phenomena have the characteristic of dissatisfactoriness. Is that true? Does your own experience verify that or disprove it? Look closely. Is it true that this is dissatisfactory? That there is suffering here? See for yourself. If you notice that there is dissatisfactoriness or suffering in your experience, become curious about that. What precisely is that like? If you find that you're distracted, simply ask again, is there dissatisfactoriness here? Is there suffering here? And continue to explore. We ask this question about suffering in order to explore it for ourselves. This teaching about dissatisfactoriness, is it true? Let your own experience be the answer. look closely. This is a time for any comments or reports or questions that you may have, whether about the meditation that we just did or the talk or anything else. This is your time.
Hello. I thought it was interesting to attempt.
Can you come as close as possible to the mic?
Sure. I thought it was interesting to attempt to distinguish between.
Just 1 second. Zev, is it possible to move that closer to me? Sorry, our technical setup is a little bit strange today. I'm not able to hear everything, so we're just going to make some adjustments here. Can you try saying something again?
Sure. Yes, how's my voice now?
Just another second.
Can you try speaking now?
All right, and how's it sounding now? Coming through?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. Thank you.
All right. So I'll start with a quick thank you. That was a very lovely meditation, and I very much enjoyed that. It was extremely pleasurable. The comment I wanted to make to the group was that I found it really interesting to work through distinguishing, as I paid close attention, between the things that were the kinds of dissatisfactoriness that might actually be there under the surface of my first realm of experience before a deeper inquiry into the various aspects of my experience or something around or under it, and the kinds of things that might arise as one creates an inquiry with a specific mental guide, a mental model that's attached to the inquiry, which then forms a part of the experience due to the inquiry itself, rather than due to the experience itself. So I thought that was an interesting thing to navigate for myself. And I'll leave my comment there for now.
And what was your name again?
Yuli.
Yuli?
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Yuli.
Nice to meet you.
So, well, I would actually be curious to know, was the second half, I'm imagining you reported that it was pleasurable, enjoyable. Was that true for both parts of the meditation?
So when you say, I'm really mostly responding, I'm saying it was very pleasurable when I was giving myself love. When I was in the inquiry part of the meditation, I was finding myself drawn occasionally back to revitalizing that love meditation so that I can regain sort of the depth of experience for there to be something to inquire on, because I would notice it would fade a little bit as I was inquiring, and some mental models about inquiry were taking over my experience. So both, but more so the love part than the inquiry.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that was very good and creative of you to bring back the love and compassion when you needed that during the second half. So good on you for that. Yeah, and it's good that you were noticing how we were using this concept of dukkha to guide our questioning. This is a very useful way to relate to many of the Buddhist teachings. If there's a specific list that interests us, or a passage in a sutra or something like that that makes us curious or have some other strong reaction of some kind, then we can use that as a basis for investigation. Say we read a sutra from the Buddha and it really makes us angry. That's interesting. We can ask ourselves about that on the meditation cushion. We can sit down and establish a concentrated, calm, compassionate state of mind, and from there, investigate. What exactly is this about? Why did that passage from the Buddha make me so angry, or so sad, or so happy, or any kind of strong reaction we have to a concept in Buddhism or a teaching in Buddhism? We can investigate that in our meditation practice, using it as a kind of seed to explore.
Yeah. I guess I want to mention a part of my experience to deepen the commentary we're exploring now. So what I found was that in order to experience I'll name two parts that were very strong in my experience of the love part of the meditation. So one was that I was noticing myself enthralled by it, taken by it, completely called into that experience, which was very rich and had many different sensations in my body and a whole atmosphere of being that was very rich for me to explore and appreciate. So that's one, this calling or being enthralled experience. A second experience was something like the fact that I was being called in a particular way. There was true element. There was distinction between this experience and other experience. And during the inquiry part of the meditation, both of these features came alive for me. And so I noticed that the depth of my appreciation and pleasure and love was existing in contrast to something that is not that. And so I thought, this actually, there seems to be an embedded difference. It's like to experience one thing, one must have an awareness of the thing that is not that thing. And so that was an interesting thing, that I drew this contrast between this is real, therefore other something not so good, not so real, not this particular kind of pleasure must exist. And actually I'll just leave it to that so I don't overburden you guys with so much of my experience. I thought that was really interesting because inside of the love meditation, this was a perfectly real, enthralling, complete experience And yet during the inquiry meditation, the sort of mental model that asks me to seek dissatisfaction created this extra awareness that then contrasts this experience I was having to the thing that's not that experience. By stepping away from it and examining this pleasurable experience, I became aware of something that's not it. I didn't suffer from that, or I didn't experience a lack of joy, but I experienced a dissipation of the presence of this pleasurable experience as I inquired. And I thought that was an interesting feature of the inquiry, that I believe my hypothesis is that it came from the mental model of inquiry. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
It's fascinating, and saying that you had such a powerful experience and kind of transitions between the techniques. I think the main thing I feel called to highlight from your report is how you were really using the compassion and love as a ground for the investigation as a starting point. So it's a bit of a warm-up that we did. We warmed ourselves up by being kind and loving to ourselves and possibly others. And that can be the basis for an investigation. What we were investigating is sort of a high-risk, high-reward topic of suffering, dissatisfactoriness. And we sort of applied a preparatory balm of coming into this happy, concentrated state of mind so that we could investigate dissatisfactoriness with clarity and happiness that might allow us to be transformed by that without hurting ourselves or something. You know, the word concentration, coming back to this theme of translation, concentration is a decent translation of the word samadhi. It's trying to be a more literal translation. It's not completely literal, but it's more on that end of the spectrum. If I were to attempt a very literal translation of the word samadhi, I would say happiness, joy. That's not a very good literal translation of the word samadhi, but it's important to know that this concentration, this absorption, has the property of joy and happiness in it. That when our mind becomes concentrated, that itself gives rise to happiness and joy. And so we can sort of bootstrap that process with a technique like loving kindness or nurture positive or cultivating these happy, joyful states of mind, because those themselves are associated with concentration. Concentration by itself is associated with happiness. And that concentration, that happiness, those things together, which are sort of inseparable, are a good basis for the kind of investigation or inquiry that we did. Yes. Just Christine? Now you need to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting. I just wanted to express how grateful I am to have this guidance in the meditation. I've gone a long life of meditating and being told to meditate and meditate, but I haven't had a lot of guided meditation before, and it's extremely rich for me to be guided and kind of nurtured along the way, and the whole experience was very, very, very satisfying and rich for me, and I'm very grateful to have met all of you, and I'm very grateful to be with all of you today. It's something I really look forward to now that I've found you all. It was really, really special because of the guidance, and I really appreciate it.
Well, it's lovely to hear that, Christine, and we're very happy that you're here, and that's been so powerful for you. It is effective to have guidance when we meditate. There's a reason that that's a common way of practicing these days. Something that you might find useful to explore, perhaps if you are practicing on your own this week, for example, would be to give yourself a guided meditation. To say instructions in your mind or even out loud and guide yourself through meditating. This is a very effective way to concentrate, to just give yourself instructions. Okay, I'm going to straighten up now. Now settle in and relax. I'm going to do this technique. Here's how you do it. Sort of talk yourself through it. You can make it fun too, because you can give yourself instructions that are perfect for you in the way that you want to do the technique. That way you can get some of the same effects of a guided meditation, but on your own. Of course, it's also an option to listen to an actual guided meditation, but often the way that that's most effective for us to meditate is something that no one else has done before. The way that's really going to work for us in particular isn't necessarily something that we can receive instructions from someone else on. We have to experiment and be playful with ourselves as we meditate to find what works for us. So if I, literally told you the things that I do when I meditate, they probably wouldn't work for you if I could even explain them. But we just sort of point like it's this way, And as we experiment with ourselves, as we try different things, guide ourselves in our own practice, we learn what works for us in a way that no one else necessarily could teach us. So you might find that useful. You might find listening to guided meditations on your own useful. But whether you're guided by someone else or by yourself, it sort of serves to keep you on track and stay concentrated and moving in a direction where you're using a technique. So I'm glad that you found that, and again, we're really happy that you're here.
Thank you for I'm going to guide myself the next meditation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Is it Hannah?
Yeah, so I definitely, I think I had a lot easier time connecting with the idea that there's dissatisfaction and suffering in this meditation than I did really being able to bring in more of the feelings of happiness right now. And I think too, I find myself in a season of life where I'm like confronted with not only my own suffering, but like the suffering of a parent, and not knowing the causes of suffering, and that being a source of distress, and kind of being faced with like this like seemingly impossible task of suddenly, in the matter of weeks, finding myself as like a 24/7 caregiver. And wondering, how is it possible to being like, well, is it even possible to escape suffering and, in such a situation, or to cultivate joy when our bodies and our minds are pushed to such limits?
Yeah. First, I just want to acknowledge, I know that taking care of someone is a very, very hard task. Not something that I've had to do for myself for an extended period of time. And I really want to honor you for taking care of your parent. Thank you for doing that. It's not easy, I know. And I'm sure I can't even begin to imagine some of the challenges that you've been through. This is one of the gross or large or obvious forms of suffering that we encounter. Noticing that people we love age and die, that they go through these various challenges. It's not pretty. It's really not pretty. all of my living grandparents died within about 4 years of each other, and the things I saw them go through were immensely challenging. And that's the human condition right there. We look that squarely in the eye in that chapter of our lives. We see, yes, there is indeed suffering. And of course, it's said that there is an end to suffering, that we can find an end to this suffering and escape from birth and death. And that's worth looking for. That's why that can be a reason why we practice, to find that end of suffering. But even as we notice the suffering, it's possible to find a kind of relief or joy or happiness simply in noticing it. It's very strange. This may not have been your experience, but when I've done this technique that we did before in the past, it's possible to notice suffering and somehow become calm or happy or at ease in different ways simply from noticing that. This is why I asked Yuli if he was finding pleasure in both parts of the meditation, because it is in fact strangely possible to find ease or even happiness from looking at the suffering directly. That may very well not have been your experience or even most people's here experience or even anyone's experience, but it is possible. There's a kind of suffering that we can add on by ignoring or even avoiding or repressing the fact that we're suffering. And when we begin to look at it closely, it's no longer tenable to avoid or ignore or repress that suffering. And there's an ease and relief that comes just from seizing this repression or avoiding. Oh, it's like, oh yes, there is a problem here. What a relief. I can acknowledge that there's a problem here. And even on the perceptual level, simply noticing, I don't know, for example, pain in the body can be weirdly pleasant and enjoyable. It's not that we want to necessarily injure ourselves or something, but there is pain in our bodies. You know, we might have noticed that we have different aches and pains or discomforts while we sit, very common. And simply noticing that can be weirdly pleasurable. So that can be something to explore as we go from clearly noticing, yes, there is suffering, and we go in search of its end. If we walk the path from suffering to the end of suffering, we have to do something along the way when we haven't yet ended suffering. And simply noticing it and noticing the joy that can strangely, unexpectedly come with that can be a source of sustenance as we walk this path.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Pam. This has been a tough meditation session. And also, I did experience what you just mentioned. The warm-up was essential for me to do this inquiry. I would not have done it. I would have probably done something else, probably not have meditated. I was so averse to looking at my discomfort. And then setting this up like this, the way, one of the things I imagined in image and in talk was being at a retreat. I imagined a moment of just that everything's okay, even though it's not. And then I noticed by looking at my suffering, my discomfort, or whatever the word that you use, dissatisfactionness, that there was a bit of joy in looking at it straight on. And it was fleeting, and then it came back, and I really appreciate that very much. I'm encouraged. I think that's definitely necessary in my path to keep me going day after day in this kind of direction. and it served me well, and I needed an extra boost of it today. Thank you.
Yes, it's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you found that, and that even though it's challenging, you learned something from that. And I also just want to surface, it would have totally been fine to do a different technique. That's, you're always welcome to do that here, and I'd say even in any meditation setting, you never have to follow the instructions. It's, you can always do what you want. It's your mind, it's your life, and there are a lot of meditation techniques. So you can use any one you want, anytime. And that's good to know, that you have permission to do that. I mean, really, you always have permission, but I'm just making it explicit that when you come here, or really to any meditation center, you can do whatever you want. You can do any technique you like, and you can even do no technique, and that can be useful. So, and this is good for a few reasons, but one of them is that just what we've been talking about, that different people are different, and different things work for different people, and you know, today might not be the day to look at dissatisfactoriness. It might just not be the day for that. Tomorrow might not be the day for that. But today might be the day for it. It's good to look at. So you get to decide what you want to do and how you want to meditate, and you know you better than I know you. You are the world's expert on you. So feel free to do whatever you like anytime, and the main thing is just to keep practicing and make use of the time that you do practice. Amy, I think we have time for your question as well, or comment. You were raising your hand there, Amy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly a question. I just wanted to make a comment that, that I really enjoy. It made me happy that when you started with the introductory talk, that there was such a lightness and joyfulness. And so it was really nice. It was, I think we all co-regulate one another as human beings. And that really kind of, that lightness and joyfulness spread nicely. So
Wonderful.
that was that.
Glad to hear that. Any other last questions or comments? Amen.
Along the lines of how we co-regulate one another, I appreciate this group and this community, and I appreciate your talk, Tasshin, and your guidance. And I think it's particularly, I know in my life, in my personal circumstances, and I think kind of broadly in the world right now, it's really important to bring that compassion practice, to turn towards it, to do it early and often, and in particular when we're dealing with suffering, to start from there and then look at the suffering through that lens. So I'm really grateful that was the way that you led this practice today. And I want to thank all of you, friends, old and new. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that, Renee. I just want to honor you all for the courage that you had to sit here with this, the challenging technique that we did, as Pam said, and of course, looking at dissatisfactoriness and suffering, if we did that, is challenging, can bring up many things. There are lots of aspects of suffering in our experience, and it's not easy to look at that. But even the compassion can be challenging. It can be challenging to love ourselves, to love other people. And that's where we started. We started with sending love and compassion to ourselves. And for many people, that's not easy. It's hard. It can bring up deep beliefs and patterns about ourselves and others that it can be challenging. And so really, I think both techniques are quite challenging and not easy, and I want to honor all of you for giving that a try. And would really encourage you with both of these things to, if you continue to do these techniques, to do them in a way that works for you. The most important thing, for example, with the compassion is to give rise to positive emotions in the body. And any compassion for any being at all is excellent. It's not necessary that you direct it towards a particular being. So say, for example, that you get angry at someone, and you know, oh, I should, be compassionate. You don't necessarily have to give rise to compassion for that person. Just any compassion for any being at all will be helpful in that situation. Say you're having a hard time and you have some self-hatred or self-loathing come up, something that happens. It's good to give rise to compassion at the time, but it doesn't necessarily have to be towards yourself. It could be for someone who's easy to love. Maybe a family member or a friend, an animal. I know people that have very successfully given rise to compassion and love for animals in their lives when it's been hard to give rise to compassion for themselves. So with all these things, it's very important to know what works for you and also to kind of modulate the technique to the circumstances and challenge level that you think is best for yourself, to take up the instructions in a way that meets you where you are. So we know these techniques are challenging, they're not easy, and it's important to do them in a way that respects ourselves and honors ourselves and uses what works for us. So thank you all for your practice and also for this community. It's wonderful to be with all of you and to have this group. And thank you for your time, and maybe we'll see you next week. Mm-hmm.